Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new video. As of patch 5.2, there have been a lot of changes and nerfs to the assassins in the mid lane. And going off of that, it's time to update my top 5 assassins for the middle lane. However, before I get into the number 5 spot, there's a few things that I want to mention. My friends at Alpha Draft have a lot of cool contests open right now. You can enter the free or the paid contests. Simply make your fantasy LCS team for this weekend. And who knows, maybe you guys will win some sweet prizes. I'll leave a link to the website in the description below. Highly recommend checking it out. But let us get back to the video. So remember guys, this top 5 list is my personal list and these are the champions that I would pick in solo queue. I also want to say this list focuses on melee assassins only. But if you guys want me to start including ranged assassins, for instance Ahri and LeBlanc, let me know in the comments below. But without further ado, let's go to the number 5 spot. Over here, we're going to be looking at Akali. Now, this number 5 spot was very close for me deciding between Akali and Talon. But by the smallest of factors, I decided to put Akali in number 5. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't be picking Akali or Talon right now because I think there's just so many better options. But for the purposes of a top 5 video, there's gotta be a number 5 spot. So let's talk about Akali. I mean, her damage after the nerfs is still more or less there. Sure, she cannot get it off as fast, but the damage overall is definitely there. I mean, Akali is still Akali. She still snowballs very well. She's still great at stomping solo queue games, and she can still stick to her target quite well despite the nerfs to her ultimate. Her W is just as good as ever. It gives that extra movement speed. You can abuse it in the laning phase to get some early game proc on your Qs with the auto attack, or escaping a gank, or just going in for some CS. And overall, Akali, quite honestly, is still pretty strong. But let's go into the cons. Like I said earlier, there are definitely better options for the mid lane, whether it's assassins or mages. So unless you're just an Akali fanatic, I don't really recommend picking her up. One of the biggest reasons is because she can no longer proc her Q mark on the target with her E ability, which then results in making her E ability feel quite useless. And her laning phase, just as always, is still so-so, but if anything is a bit weaker now since again, she can no longer proc the Q with her E. Overall, Akali not a bad champion still, but there are better picks. Alright, the number 4 spot I'm sure caught some of you off guard. Kassadin. This is a champion I don't think I've included in any of my assassin lists for quite some time. But of course, with the recent changes to the mid lane assassins and a lot of them getting hit quite hard, I think Kassadin is finally gonna start making his appearance. Not only because of the other assassins getting nerfed, but since a lot of them were AP assassins, for instance Fizz and Akali, and now they're weaker, well, you're gonna be seeing a lot more mages. And this is exactly where Kassadin shines. So like I said, he's extremely strong against AP mids because his shield from his Q can absorb quite a bit of damage, and the reason that's good is because any trades you do in the laning phase with a mage or any AP champion will usually be in Kassadin's favor. But let's move to his W, which I really think is probably his best ability. Ever since the Kassadin rework several patches ago, I've always been extremely excited about how his new W works. Not only does his W give him great sustain on his mana, which helps him significantly in the laning phase, but it also does quite a bit of damage while also being an auto attack reset. Then you have his ultimate, which really defines Kassadin being extremely mobile and just annoying to catch. His E ability is still somewhat mediocre. I mean, it's great whenever you stack it up for the slow, but in terms of damage, it's not the best thing in the world. Overall, Kassadin is a very good champion to pick right now, especially if you want to stomp solo queue quite easily, and especially if they pick their mid laner and it's an AP mage. But the cons of Kassadin, like I said, first picking him before they pick their mid laner, or picking him into an AD mid laner, for instance Zed or Yasuo, well, that could definitely turn out quite bad. So he is a situational pick. His Q no longer silences and the damage from his Q isn't anything to write home about, but that's okay because his W is just amazing. Overall, Kassadin finally making an appearance on my list, and I do highly recommend picking him up because you'll be seeing a lot of AP mids now. But let's move into the top 3 assassins. Starting it all off is gonna be Katarina, an assassin I didn't put in my previous iteration of this series. But once again, this patch has done quite a bit of things to the assassins in the mid lane, and with that being said, I feel like Katarina is also making her way up on the list. So even though Katarina also got nerfed a few patches ago, the nerfs to her weren't as bad as some of the ones that were done this patch. And again, since you're seeing a lot more AP mid laners, especially skill shot oriented ones like for instance Xerath, well, Katarina being so mobile is great against these champions. She's one of the better assassins for teamfights because she has those resets and she has a ridiculous amount of AoE damage with her ultimate. She's another example of an assassin, much like LeBlanc from my mage list, who works very well off of mistakes. If their squishies are out of position by just a little bit, well, you're gonna jump in and you're gonna burst them down in a matter of seconds, get the reset going, and probably clean up the rest of the fight. And since most Katarinas do start off with boots and 4 pots, she's pretty good at roaming early on. The cons of Katarina, her early game, once once again, not the best, especially after she got nerfed a few patches ago. So chances are you're going to be kind of chilling in the back, throwing Qs to try and get as much CS as possible. She does bring 0 CC to the team. Now, depends on the rest of your picks, that could be a big problem. And finally, her ultimate is a channel ability. Now, I know it's a very strong ultimate, and it does a lot of damage, but it is a channel ability, meaning that it can be cancelled quite easily. But overall, I'm enjoying Katarina a lot more recently, and I'm seeing her in solo queue much more frequently. So maybe you want to think about picking her up once again. In the number 2 spot, we're gonna be seeing Zed once again, which is the same spot I gave him in my last top 5 assassin video. Now, I may be somewhat biased when it comes to rating Zed because he is my most known champion and potentially my best one as well. And he did get nerfed this patch with his attack speed being lowered down by quite a bit. But with all that being said, I still feel like giving him the number 2 spot is very fair. So let's talk more about Zed. I mean, he's still a very strong champion despite the nerfs. The nerfs to Zed this patch were mainly targeted at his late game, but his early and mid game is still just as strong. And his mid game is usually where I feel like he shines the most. He also has one of the more interesting kits of an assassin, but in a good way, offering him a lot of outplay potential, probably the highest outplay potential of any assassin in the game. And working off of his outplay potential, I mean, Zed has probably one of the best mobilities of an assassin, being able to cover the most distance in the shortest amount of time. Let's quickly talk about the nerfs. As I mentioned, it mainly focused on his late game, and his late game is where Zed would always be split pushing a lane. And the nerfs were directly towards the power of Zed's split push. But quite honestly, even with the nerfs, I still feel like his split pushing ability is there. Sure, it is not as strong as before this patch, but it is still something that you can definitely do. And the final thing I want to mention about Zed is the fact that I honestly think he has one of the better laning phases of all the assassins, which is why his mid game tends to be so strong. The cons of Zed, a lot of counters to his ultimate. You have Q assess, you have Zhonya's, you have Lissandra, you have Kill, and the list really just goes on. And on top of him having so many counters to one of the main sources of damage, well, he's also a very hard champion to pick up. The learning curve of Zed is among the highest in League of Legends. Overall, Zed, still a strong champion, he's still Zed, still can do exactly what he used to be able to before. It's just a little more difficult, that's it. But without question, still a very high priority pick for mid lane. Alright, the number 1 spot, I decided to give it to Yasuo. I wonder how many of you guys expected to see Yasuo in the number 1 position. I must confess, I'm not 100% sure if he's really truly the strongest assassin right now, or if it's just a champion that I'm really enjoying and doing very well with. But whatever the reason, like I said at the beginning, this is my personal top 5 list of champions that I would pick in solo queue, and Yasuo is definitely up there. With all the changes, I think Yasuo is very strong right now. Again, a lot of mages mid lane, Yasuo being very mobile in the laning phase, spamming your E on the minions, on the champions, etc. Just being extremely annoying and being a very strong lane bully. Next to Zed, Yasuo's laning phase is among the best of assassins. You got his win wall, which, I mean, it's a win wall, not much else to be said. One thing I really like about him is the fact that first of all, he has a lot of damage if you go the static shift IE build, getting 100% crit chance, but also he brings a lot of CC to the fight. If you're unaware, knock up CC is the best form of CC because tenacity does not reduce the duration as to which you are knocked up, as opposed to being stunned, snared, or silenced. On top of that, he snowballs extremely well. For instance, if I were to ever get my IE and static shift combo before the 20-minute mark in the game, well, I don't think I've ever lost. Well, at least not in patch 5.2. But Yasuo is definitely one of my personal favorites to play in the mid lane. I'm also thinking of releasing a video on him talking about 3 potential builds that I feel like are very strong. The cons of this champion, however, is the fact that he is quite difficult to play at the higher level. Not the easiest champion to make escapes with, since his E is a very offensive type ability, not so much defensive, unless you just get lucky in the positioning of enemy champions and or minions. And finally, IE did get nerfed by 5%, which did hit Yasuo quite hard, but you can make up for that 5% in your runes. But overall, Yasuo, my personal favorite pick of patch 5.2. But that's it for this video, guys. I know some of you might be questioning where is Fizz. Well, he got hit so hard that I really don't even want to pick him up. And I know there's been a lot of hype around AD Fizz. I've never tried it, but I don't see it being all that amazing. At least not to the point where it's better than any of the champions that I have currently listed. Other than maybe Akali. But again, that is it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something new. If you did, throw in a like, share it with your friends, and I hope to see you for the next video. Peace.